Chapter 1106, Making Contact. Returning to the real world, Klein immediately took out a pen and paper and wrote a short letter. Investigate the nameless island which led to the deaths of Grimm, William, and Polly. This can be done through the descendants of Edwards, Benjamin Abraham, and the descendants of the three deceased. This was a letter to Queen Mystic Bernadette, so Klein didn't write the reason. He believed that she would understand what this meant. After folding the letter, Klein casually found a candle and began the summoning ritual. After completing the setup, he placed the letter on the altar, took 2 steps back, and recited in ancient Hermes. I summon in my name. An invisible creature that roams the upper realms, a strange spiritual body that is friendly to humans, a messenger that belongs solely to Bernadette Gustave. The moment he said that, Klein's spiritual perception was triggered. He instinctively activated his spirit vision with a mere thought. However, he didn't see anything. Then, he discovered that the letter placed on the altar had disappeared. Queen Mystic's messenger is very special. Next time, I'll switch to using my spirit body threads vision. Klein was stunned for a second before he sighed inwardly. In the evening, under the illumination of the street lamps that lit up one after another, a carriage drove to the intersection of the Backland Bridge area and East Borough and stopped by the side of the streets. Wearing a long dress and a dark cloak, Fours paid the fare of 3 soldi before alighting from the rental carriage. She walked slowly along the shadows of the street, preparing to make a large detour to escape from her imaginary stalker. At the end of the previous tarot gathering, she had swiftly overcome her laziness, packed up, and went out to visit her former teachers, classmates, and colleagues. As for the reason, there was no need for a special reason. It was very normal to care about friends and acquaintances after an air raid. And the reason why it wasn't last week was because, in the eyes of the ordinary citizens, the situation in Backland was especially tense. There could be a new round of attacks at any moment, so everyone naturally tried their best not to leave the house. During the visit, Fours had originally planned on diverting the topic onto the strange tales at the hospital, but to her surprise, there was no need for her to do so at all. Her former teachers, classmates, and colleagues would usually chat about such matters on their own accord after some idle chatter, making one convinced that such illusions happened at every hospital. No, Fours knew that it wasn't an illusion, so she inexplicably felt horrified, suspecting that she would have nightmares at night. I don't have to make any major changes at all. As long as the patient's miraculous recoveries are changed to them having their physical wounds healed, only to have them go bonkers, it would make for an excellent horror story. Furthermore, it happens in a city that everyone is familiar with and also in the hospital that people often come into contact with in the city, but exudes a terrifying atmosphere. It will result in perfect immersion. I can almost foresee another best-selling novel about to be bomb. I just don't know if I can write this genre well. The only problem is that this story will lack sufficient emotion. A female patient passionately kissing a face that's covered in mushrooms and weeds. Isn't that way too outlandish? Fours walked as she thought, entering a creative state of mind. At this moment, her vision blurred. She saw a figure walk out from the shadows in front of her where the gas lamps couldn't illuminate. The figure wore a black trench coat and a half-top hat. He had a deep-set face with cold facial features. Apart from his gold-rimmed glasses, he looked identical to the crazy adventurer of the 5 Seas, J.M. Sparrow. Although Fours knew that Mr. World wouldn't hunt her and was here to fulfill the contract, she couldn't help but tense up. It was as though she had met her strictest teacher from back in her school days. Good evening. Her footsteps slowed down, but she still continued moving forward and greeted him. Klein nodded without a word. He turned around and walked into a secluded alley to the side. The gas lamps inside were already damaged, so it was dark. Despite the dark environment, Fours similarly didn't say a word. She lowered her head slightly and followed behind J.M. Sparrow at an adequate pace. When they reached the depths of the alley, Klein looked around and said in a deep voice, "Help me ask your teacher if he knows of this person, Benjamin Abraham. If he knows him, I want all his information and all the text and pictures he left behind." Okay. Fours was nervously waiting for Mr. World to teleport her somewhere else, but she never expected him to mention something else for no reason. She nearly failed to react. She didn't ask why and quickly nodded in agreement, as though she couldn't wait to do it. Then she took a deep breath and continued waiting for Jayamon Sparrow to approach her. He grabbed her shoulder and began teleporting. But after a few seconds, nothing happened. Fours looked up in shock, only to see Mr. World still standing in front of her, looking at her. She then heard him say in a deep voice, "Write it now." "Write it now?" Fours didn't ask why, as she subconsciously said, "I didn't bring any paper, a pen, envelope, or stamp with me." Before she could finish her sentence, the 4 items were thrown at her. Fours caught the items and took a few steps out. Using the gas lamps at the end of the alley, which opened up to the roads and the hard wall, she quickly wrote the letter to her teacher, Dorian Gray Abraham. With both hands in his pockets, Klein waited patiently without any signs of impatience. In fact, he had long been lurking around Miss Magician without showing himself. According to the address Fours provided, he had been secretly monitoring her from the moment she left home in the afternoon. His monitoring was done by getting his marionettes to pray to see God Calvatua from time to time, while his actual body stayed above the gray fog, using the prayer light dots to observe the situation around the magician. With the help of his true vision, Klein was currently certain that Zeritol hadn't targeted Miss Magician, thus it was safe to make contact with her. After knowing that Miss Magician had met Zeritol's marionette, how could he be at ease and be daring enough to meet her and take her traveling? Now he was certain that Zeritol had been attracted by the Abraham family's sealed artifact or Saint of Secrets Bodies. As for a mere sequence 6 like the magician, she wasn't worthy of notice. Hence, she wasn't exposed. A few minutes later, Fours finished writing. She used a sticky herbal powder she carried with her to seal the envelope and pasted the stamp. "Do I throw it into the mailbox now?" Fours glanced at the cover of the letter with her teacher's address and real name and asked hesitantly. She felt that she had to do it herself. She couldn't hand it over to the world, or it might bring danger to her teacher. Of course, if Jayamon Sparrow insisted, Fours felt that there was nothing she could do. Even if she tore the letter apart, there was still a possibility of her being hypnotized or having her spirit channeled. Klein nodded indiscernibly. "Return after you're finished posting it." Phew, Fours let out a long sigh of relief. Turning around, she ran towards the street and found the mailbox. After finishing all of this, she returned to the dark alley. Without waiting for Jayamon Sparrow to speak, she handed over the fountain pen and the remaining 2 stamps. She very quickly said, "1 was enough." Klein gave Miss Magician a look before he took the stamp and pen and calmly said, "This means that your teacher's residence is less than 100 kilometers from Backland." Fours' expression froze. "What's the big deal? I also know that your teacher lives in Pritz Harbor, and there's a high chance that he hasn't moved away yet. As for why I gave you 3 stamp tickets, of course it was intentional." Klein muttered to himself before taking a few steps forward to stand in front of Miss Magician. He then reached out his left hand, that was wearing a transparent glove, and grabbed the lady's shoulder. Fours subconsciously lowered her head again. The surrounding colors immediately became saturated and layered, while countless, indescribable figures flashed. When the things and colors she saw returned to normal, Fours instinctively raised her head to thank him. However, Jayamon Sparrow had already disappeared. Fours sized up her surroundings in a daze and realized that she was standing in an empty corner. In front of her was a door, and a din and the smell of alcohol were emitted from beyond the door. Fours pulled at her cloak and walked out the door with a hint of fear, only to see many men dressed as pirates. They had scimitars and guns, either hanging or lodged by their waist. While drinking hard liquor, they discussed the strengths of the fleets of Fasak and Lone in high spirits. Quite a number of beautifully dressed women were amongst them, like dancing butterflies. She was wearing a long, dark-colored cloak in a Backland style. Her brown hair was long and slightly curled. She had a rather mature temperament, but her expression of fear made it seem like Fours was a lamb that had barged into a wolf pack. It was so disharmonious and eye-catching, and it quickly attracted the attention of many. She felt a little familiar with what those people had said to her. It was as if they were part of a language branch she had learned, but she couldn't understand them immediately. Where am I? What am I doing? Who are they? As Fors was at a loss, a plump man squeezed over and said in broken Lonese, 10 soli, one night. Fors had been involved in many of the Beyonder circles over the years. Although she didn't know where she was, she knew very well what kind of situation she was in. The light in her eyes flickered strangely before they converged into one point. An indescribable aura emanated from her body, making the people around her subconsciously avoid her gaze. This was the authority of a judge, a qualitative change in the ability of an arbiter. Berserksea, Thoros Island. Danitz hid in the shadows, watching the intelligence peddler, Bartz, in a serious manner.